I took a flyer on this guy. I let him into the Circus Catch Fantasy League, and he goes ahead and he wins the league. Out of 8 people, he wins it. Not even someone who's on the show every week. And then, to top that off, at work, when we work together, he wins a contest, and he gets to pie yours truly in the face.
Like, go overboard or anything, but y'all are just like, dang, I'm gonna get your nose. Y'all gotta do.
There we go.
Oh, man.
Ethically, how does this make you feel to humiliate me? I have a family, and you're just going to do that to me?
You can take it as you trained me. So you can take it as, Jedi Sensei, you can take it as that, and you can take it as you're a really good trainer at work. And as far as fantasy goes, I think my career fantasy, knock on wood, somewhere in here, is 50%. Like 1 out of every 2 leagues I've signed up for, I've won. So hopefully that continues, or I just jinx myself and I'm never going to win again. Take it, take your lumps, take it as you're a great trainer, and it's okay. We'll get past this.
I tried my best. The student has become the master. What can you say?
Welcome to the Circus Catch. Ow!
Rewind it back, give a listen, tell me I'm wrong. I'm becoming a social media guru. I'm always up for the challenge.
Are you kidding me? This is something that you've never seen in the history of golf. Guess who called that one? What more can you say?
I am dubbed the Houston player hater. I don't have time to believe. I want that golden sombrero and have the heart of the champion, as some would say.
You got butthurt.
What is he thinking? Do you remember the bubble? Didn't really look too fancy in my eyes.
I do have a couple W's in my belt.
Is he the greatest of all time?
It is like magic.
Not sure if any of you heard at home, but the NFL is going bonkers right now. Taylor will rejoin me in just a second to talk all about that. We've got a lot on deck today, but before we get into that, I want to welcome Jesse, who is back on the show, no longer in Oklahoma, now setting up shop in Wisconsin. Jesse, thanks for joining the show today.
Thanks for having me back, Jordan. It feels good to finally get back with you guys. I appreciate the shout last week, by the way. I missed you guys, so good to be back with you.
Still repping OK State, which is just okay with me.
Yeah. Well, men's basketball team sucks, but I'm still a fan. So.
Amen. Well, we got a lot to talk about, especially the madness that is March. We've got about a week until brackets set, but we've been looking at some of these championships. Let's go ahead and dive into that, Jesse. I haven't been able to keep up as much as you would have liked me to, admittedly. I'm trying, but I see you posting every few minutes. You're like, this team's in, this team's in, this team's in. And I'm like, what? Who? Where is this school? I don't know. I am trying, though. But one game I did catch that I really enjoyed was the ASUN Championship, which was really very close, even at the end. It seemed like Austin P, every time they were trying to come back, they just couldn't overcome what Stetson was doing. Even that last second 3, it looked like the bank almost made it in, could have made for overtime, but congrats to Stetson for winning that one.
Yeah, and congrats to them. Their first ever NCAA tournament appearance on their home floor, too. That's a lot of the low major conferences. They don't have the finances to go to these neutral site locations and host a week worth of basketball. So the home courts, the higher seed will host. And in Stetson's case, not only did they get to host for a shot at their first ever NCAA tournament, they won with their home fans in the crowd. And yeah, kudos to them. Also, Longwood going back to the tournament out of the Big South. Man, so much action. The Missouri Valley Championship between Drake and Indiana State was electric. I'm really hopeful that the committee will give some mid-major love this year, unlike every single other year in the past 20 years. But Indiana State deserves to be in the tournament. They really do. And they got their first top 25 appearance in a season since Larry Bird was running the show for them back in 1979. So tells you how long it's been for the Sycamores. So I think they need some love. Get to the dance. They deserve it. Yeah, so much going on. We got the West Coast Conference Championship tonight. Gonzaga is in the WCC Championship for the 28th year in a row. What Mark Few is done in Spokane, Jordan, is just unreal. Granted, the West Coast Conference does it a little weird. The top 2 seeds automatically go to the semifinals. So you only have to win one game, Gonzaga, to get to the championship. But the fact that they've been there 28 years in a row, I mean, there's just something about consistency that is unheralded in sports. And man, we're seeing some craziness going on already.
There's all of these that won't be, a lot of them won't be settled until tomorrow, but we are watching them right now. We'll know the end result of the Horizon League Championship. I'm watching it right here on the side. 55-54 is what I'm seeing, Oakland versus Milwaukee. I might be a little bit behind you.
They actually ahead of me. It's 54-53 Milwaukee right now.
Oh,
but anyway.
Okay. Well, I stream a little faster than you. That's a first. Which other conference championship or conference tournament has stood out to you so far?
In terms of the low major conferences, I really think people need to watch out for McNeese out of the Southland. Looks like they're going to wrap up a semifinal win tonight. Right now, they're blowing away Lamar, but tomorrow night, getting for that spot, that Southland Conference Championship, this team is dangerous, and they could be a 13, 14 seed to look out for. When you're filling out your bracket, look out for this team. This team is dangerous. They put up numbers real quick. Another team, the winningest team in basketball right now, James Madison. They have 31 wins. They're 31-3. This team, they have some weaknesses that I think the bigger, stronger schools, like the Power 6 schools that all have the big size and stuff, that will be able to exploit. But I think James Madison is going to be in that 10-12 range, which could, the 5-12, 6-11 matchups, they always produce these big upset picks, I guess. Doesn't always pan out, but 12s and 11s are the most popular upset picks, of course. So look for James Madison to be a pretty popular upset pick. I'm looking forward to seeing what Houston does in the Big 12 tournament as the number 1 overall team. Right now, projected number 1 overall seed. Another number 1, Purdue. Zach Edey just won Big 10 Player of the Year. So I think if Purdue plays really well in the Big 10 tournament this weekend, they're going to lock themselves into a 1 seed. Another team, Tennessee, could really lock themselves into the 1 line with a good showing in the SEC tournament. There's a lot of discrepancy between whether or not North Carolina is deserved or if Arizona is deserved of a number 1 seed. To me, it's Arizona, but I won't put my bias out there. I think there's a couple teams that have the potential, I guess, is the best way I could put it, to be on that 1 line. But I'm really just hoping the committee, like I said before, I hope the committee finally shows some love to some of these mid-major schools that have played really, really well and don't benefit these Power 5, Power 6 conferences teams that are 7-11 or 8-10 in conference play.
Jesse, on the women's side of things, obviously you can't talk about women's college basketball without talking about the University of South Carolina. Involved in some crazy finishes over the last couple days. First, you had the semis where they played against Tennessee, and I'm going to try my best not to go off on a little tirade here, but how the hell do you not play defense on that? You set up your defense as if you're going to play zone, as if you're going to box someone out, but how many seconds were left? Less than 2? You should be sticking to your person the entire time. I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm at a loss for words, Jordan, to be honest with you. I don't know. Granted, Cardoza she's not hit a 3-pointer her entire career up until that point. And Tennessee was playing that style where they're only expecting her to score inside the entire night, like the entire day. She was not guarded at the perimeter whatsoever. But there's a second left in the game. You're on, and it comes off an inbounds play where you always set a defense off of an inbounds play, especially from half court. There's no reason you shouldn't be face guarding someone right up top with a second left. She's got to catch and shoot. and she caught that. She had time to just look at the basket and set it up. And oh man, you have a chance to end a winning streak like that, like South Carolina's, put an end to that dominance in the SEC. But it pales, honestly, it pales in comparison to what happened the following day for South Carolina.
What a wild scene in that game. How many ejections were there in that one? 6?
Yeah, 6 or 7, something like that. And then you had a fan get arrested. Just chaos. But I don't mean to be disrespectful to Dawn Staley or Kim Mulkey, but especially Kim Mulkey's comments after the game. You're a head coach. You're supposed to be a leader of women, leader of this team, and you're saying your comments that those weren't dirty, cheap shots by your players, when that is widely disagreed with by the entire basketball community. I understand sticking up for your players, but there's a line you got to draw.
Obviously, some of the premier talent in all of college basketball, a lot of alphas on both squads. Just it's gonna happen. Again, to the post game press conference, I don't think that was handled particularly well. You got to step up, especially when you're the coach, especially when you have essentially what are kids. You know, you got to think about, these are 18, 19, 20, and 21-year-old women, sure, but they are young women. They are kids. You have to be the one to step up and be in control of the situation, and she clearly wasn't. But to that point, like I told you before we started recording, no press is bad press, right? This season, the women's college game has taken off. Obviously, Caitlin Clark has a lot to do with it. This is the talk of basketball right now. Forget what the NBA is doing. This game, this ending, is what everyone in the basketball circle is talking about right now. So, hey, I mean, you got to find a silver lining in anything, right? Jesse, the quarterback carousel continues. We are now in the legal tampering window. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, legal tampering. So it sounds a little funny that we're in this, but this is anything but funny. It's very confusing. I do want to break it down to show you where all the different quarterbacks went. The biggest chip of all, Kirk Cousins, signed a 4-year deal to go from the Minnesota Vikings to his third team, the Atlanta Falcons. Most of us think the Atlanta Falcons were about a quarterback away from being a serious contender. Well, they now have their guy, Kirk Cousins, going over to a team that has a lot of talent as far as offensive weapons goes. Drake London, we've expected to be really good for a while. Kyle Pitts, same thing. Bijan Robinson, we saw a lot of flashes from him last year. Tyler Algier, so they got a lot of weapons over there. Jesse, I want to ask you this. Kirk Cousins has obviously made a ton of money in the offseason, a ton of money every time he renegotiates a contract. He hasn't done much in the playoffs. Are we sure that Kirk Cousins to Atlanta is the right move for that team?
I definitely think it is. The NFC South is not a premier division. You know, it's one of the worst in the league last year. But Atlanta has so many weapons offensively that I think he can overcome, you know, some of his lack of success in the playoffs, where he doesn't have to be the guy that throws for 500 yards and 6 touchdowns in a playoff game. He's got guys around him, Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier in the backfield, and then he's got receivers like Kyle Pitts and Drake London that are going to get catches and get yards after the catch for him. And, you know, obviously he had good weapons in Minnesota. We have the best receiver in the game he was throwing to, but it's different when you've got a whole host of guys. Atlanta, I think, might need to bolster their offensive line a little bit too, to drive home this offensive firepower that they've got. But I think this is the move, a very good move for Atlanta, and one that could propel them to not just a division title, but somewhere near an NFC title game.
But Kirk Cousins also getting Darnell Mooney. They just signed him to a 3-year deal as well. So plenty of weapons out there. I think the excuses are coming to a bare minimum. People are going to expect a lot from him out there. Let's take a look at Pittsburgh. And Austin, I'm sorry you couldn't make it onto this one. I was going to let you go on a full diatribe with this. I know Austin, you're going to be watching. You don't love Russ to Pittsburgh, to your beloved Steelers. Personally, Jesse, this might be a hot take as well. I think it was a good move. He may or may not be the starter this year, but it gives them the option between him and Kenny Pickett. I do think Russ is going to win the job. I think the stats show that he's better than how he's been perceived. I think his first year in Denver was terrible. This last year was not bad. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. And I think he's still got something left in the tank. So good thing with them. If it doesn't work out, Denver's fronting 95% of his contract. They're paying him the veteran minimum to play there. So really not a lot of high risk for Pittsburgh. Their defense is solid, especially now that they have Patrick Queen back there. They did lose Deontay Johnson to Carolina. I don't really get that move, to be honest, 100% honest with you. But Russ to Pittsburgh, what do you think?
I don't know. I just don't understand a guy, and I'm not saying Russ is old, but he's been in the league for, 12 years now. So
say he's old. He's old. He's old as crap.
yeah. So you've got guys that are younger, and I don't think Kenny Pickett is the answer there. And I'm not trying to say that Mason is the answer either, but Mason helped lead them into the playoffs last season at the very least. Russell Wilson just doesn't seem like he's a franchise guy anymore, like a guy that's going to help you win a Super Bowl anymore. Obviously his 2 years in Denver were very tumultuous, did not receive the best press from his teammates about his locker room ethics and stuff like that. And that's, up to the topic for a different day, obviously, but I just don't see this being a big successful move for Pittsburgh. You're right, though. Very low risk. Denver's paying him, $68 million or something like that for the buyout of that contract. So I don't know. I don't like it personally. I don't think it's a great move for Pittsburgh, but, low risk, high reward could work out.
Largest dead cap hit in NFL history by more than double the second biggest dead cap hit, which obviously is Aaron Rodgers from last year's Green Bay taking that dead cap hit. A couple of other moves that I found interesting. Guys who are going to compete for a starting job don't necessarily have it as well. Gardner Minshew, who actually played really, really well last year. A lot of people don't think about that because the Colts did not make the playoffs. I bet a lot of people didn't know he was on the Colts. But Gardner Minshew played really well, and we've seen him do this in the past. He is a serviceable quarterback. I don't think he will ever be an elite talent in the NFL. But Gardner Minshew to Vegas, I think that's a move that I can get behind, at least for now, even being a bridge quarterback or even having some competition with Aiden O'Connell out there. Drew Lock going to the New York Giants, I think that one is pretty interesting too. Obviously, they lost Tyrod Taylor, so they don't have anyone to back up Daniel Jones, maybe Tommy DeVito, but they got Drew Lock, Daniel Jones. I could see a quarterback competition there. Daniel Jones likely the starter just because of the investment put into him. But I think Minshew and Lock can make cases to start for those teams.
You got to think about, too, with Minshew in Indianapolis, if he completes that fourth down pass against Houston at the very end of the season, Indianapolis probably might go to the playoffs. If he completes that pass, might be a different story. So there's a lot of, especially I was following a lot of NFL threads on Reddit, a lot of hatred for Minshew for the poor pass at the end of that game. It was like the signifying, like dignifying moment for him for the entire season. But you're right. Throughout the course of the year, he played very well in coming off the bench and having to start for this team when he wasn't expected to initially until Anthony Richardson went down. I think I don't know if Vegas is necessarily going to be a great fit because we've talked about their offensive struggles quite often here on the show. He's a good quarterback. He's a good NFL quarterback, not an elite talent, but I think he can get a team to the playoffs. I don't know if Vegas is necessarily the one team I think he can get there, but he's been given a chance with a good contract to prove his worth, basically.
Another quarterback move, Sam Darnold, who a lot of people said was going to be in competition with Brock Purdy to take the starting job in San Francisco last year, has found a new home in Minnesota. I don't love Sam Darnold as a quarterback. I think he may just be a slight tier above Minshew and Locke. Personally, the arm talent is 1,000 times better than those guys. The decision making, I haven't been super impressed by. But Minnesota obviously quarterbackless now without Kirk Cousins. So maybe they draft a quarterback in this draft, or maybe they have him there for now so that they can focus on other positions of need.
It's an interesting story. I don't think he would have won the starting job in San Francisco either. So I think there's something to look for in Minnesota. So that's probably why he left. But I think you're right, though. I think Minnesota could end up drafting a quarterback in the draft and making a camp type battle in the preseason to see who their week 1 starter is going to be. Because I'm not convinced that Sam Darnold is going to be a week 1 starter.
We do need to talk about the least sexy quarterback trade of all this season so far. It's Mac Jones to Jacksonville for a 6th round pick. Man, this 2021 class is disappointing to say the least. Mac Jones is out of his starting role. We don't know what's happening with Justin Fields, which we will get to in just a second. Obviously, Trey Lance didn't work out in San Francisco. Zach Wilson not going to be on the Jets this upcoming year. What happened, Jesse?
I don't know. Some draft classes, some position draft classes just don't pan out. I mean, there's success sometimes and there's failures sometimes. And I mean, we've seen a lot with like the Browns and the Raiders and their draft history and stuff like that, that just picking the wrong guys just busts in the NFL. I'm not sitting here and saying that Mac Jones or Zach Wilson are draft busts by any means, because Wilson was a starter in New York for a couple of years. Mac Jones was a starter for New England. But just not great, not successful, not living up to the first round hype of what a first round quarterback should do in the league.
So last quarterback news before we move on, and that is the lack of news with Justin Fields. The Chicago Bears still at this moment have Justin Fields on their roster and still hold the number 1 pick. I think for most of us, it was a foregone conclusion that Justin Fields would be moving on either to Pittsburgh or to Atlanta. Neither of them have an opening for him anymore. So where does he go? Could it be possible that he stays in Chicago and they meander some kind of epic trade to get out of the number 1 pick?
No comment. But I think it's possible. I do.
You're on a sports podcast. You have to comment.
Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, I think it's possible, man. Come on. I mean, I don't think Caleb Williams is going to be a successful NFL quarterback, first of all. I will just say that right now. Not a fan of the guy. So, can come at me all you want. I think, sure, it might be a hot take, but I saw USC play at the end of the season, and the best game they had from a quarterback perspective was the bowl game that he did not play in. So, I don't see him being a successful guy in the NFL. It doesn't seem like he's going to be a great locker room presence, first of all. And I don't think he's going to want to battle a quarterback battle with Justin Fields, who is a NFL starting quarterback. So I think Justin could stay there, and Chicago will try to get like a good center or offensive lineman in a trade and give up that first overall pick. So, it's possible. Something can happen.
You see what this is?
With the fire.
These are flames, because that was one of the hottest takes that I've heard about Caleb Williams in a very, very long time.
For a while.
Not a successful quarterback in the league. They're comparing him to Patrick Mahomes. And I'm not saying you're wrong, but are you sure?
Positive.
You heard it here first, everybody. Folks, so much happened in free agency this weekend. I had to break it up into 2 different segments, and I had to bring back, for his 3rd time on the Circus Catch podcast, first time in 2024, Mr. Taylor Biggs. Taylor, thank you for joining the show.
What's up, man? Thanks for having me.
Of course, anytime. I want to start with the biggest non-quarterback news that we got, and that was Saquon Barkley heading from the Giants, staying in division, and going over to the Philadelphia Eagles. What was your take on this one?
That was juicy because then you had the outside perspective too of another. I don't know if you saw, but you had another giant legend in Tiki Barber basically saying, you're dead to us, kind of thing. And then Saquon, they actually had a little back and forth, which was pretty entertaining. But I didn't see the Eagles going after Saquon. That's for sure. But I think it'll relieve a lot of stress off Jalen Hurts, and obviously you'll still see the tush push because hey, it works. If it's not broke, don't. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But Saquon's gonna take a lot of pressure off Jalen, AJ Brown, because once you have those weapons and everything. But I did not see that coming for sure. Especially, I thought he would leave. I did not think he would go to a division rival, which obviously Tiki Barber and other Giant fans are probably very upset right now, and as they should be, jumping ship to a division rival like that. But hey, got paid. So did the other running backs today.
I love the drama, obviously, on the Evan and Tiki shows, what we're talking about, Tiki Barber saying that, and then the back and forth on X/Twitter. Going to be interesting. Like you said, the tush push, obviously you lose a big piece of that in Jason Kelsey, but you do get a bigger weapon in Saquon Barkley than you had in DeAndre Swift. No disrespect to him, but the Eagles have weapons. Not sure about the rest of that offense. Staying in division, let's look at what Washington did. They may be the surprise of the day, landing Austin Eckler, the former Chargers running back.
I thought he was going to get a little more than that. But that's a great signing for Washington. They're pretty much committed to this full-on rebuild. They're trying to, from the top down, obviously being sold, Josh Harris and everything. They're moving on from the Snyder era, and they're trying to completely remake that franchise. And not a bad way to start, especially like I said on that contract, 2 years, $11 million for a quality running back. That's not bad.
This Washington team, I don't know if they're going to compete next year, but I wouldn't be shocked if they were a dark horse to take over that division, considering the losses that we have in Philly and in Dallas now, which Tony Pollard no longer there. He's now in Tennessee.
I saw that as well, essentially giving up on Derrick Henry. I thought the same thing, that Derrick was pretty much gone in that situation, but with the amount that Tony Pollard got, I'm very interested to see what actually Derrick gets, because essentially swapping out running backs for that. But you already know what you're getting in a known commodity, obviously, in Derrick Henry. Maybe they just thought, shiny new toy. Obviously, Pollard didn't impress too many people last year in his first year as a featured back, but there were rumors around him being dinged up pretty much all year. So obviously you get a lot younger in that regard and a lot less miles on the tires in Tony Pollard than Derrick Henry. Maybe they know something we don't, because they know Derrick Henry better than anybody. Maybe they saw, like I said, there was too much tread on the tires and they decided to go something newer.
Tony Pollard as a featured back, I don't think he should be the single back on that team. I think they do need to make another move somewhere. One of those pieces, we were talking about the Giants earlier, actually, Devin Singletary was going to be a free agent. I thought maybe a good complimentary back. The Giants actually took him. So he is right now their main back on that roster. There was a lot of drama that happened over the last couple of weeks. Dalton Schultz went on the Pat McAfee show. I don't know if you saw that. When he re-signed his deal to stay in Houston, he called Dallas a circus. Jerry Jones saying that the Cowboys are quote unquote all in, which we talked about on the podcast last week. What the heck does that even mean? You're all in. You should be all in every year. It seemed like you were all in this year. And yet there's crickets in Dallas. I haven't heard a thing happening there.
I sense with all the movement that we had here, just day one of tampering, aka start of free agency, I sense that they're still trying to get the Dak money figured out first. And then once they get that resolved, they're probably going to make a couple moves here and there. But yeah, you lost Tony, you lost a couple people today in free agency. like you said, complete crickets. They made no transactions other than losing people and possibly gaining comp picks, which I don't think is Dallas's plan. So I would guess that they're trying to get that Dak money solved, and as soon as that's solved, they're going to make a little bit of noise. I don't know if they're going to make any big swings or anything like that, but I think you'll see some mid moves. So we were talking about the New York Giants being giant losers so far, but one thing they did get, um, they traded a second and a fifth today to the Panthers for Brian Burns and immediately signed him to a 5-year, $150 million contract. What was your take on that, Jordan? Because just 2 years ago, our team was rumored to give uh, an offer of 2 firsts and a second round pick to Carolina for that. Obviously, Brian Burns, really good pass rusher, but what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, obviously, the Rams do need some help in the pass rush for sure. So it would have been nice to get someone like that. But that's a hefty, hefty price to pay. And I know, like, I get it. You have to pay somebody like that much money. Is that really going to help the Giants? I don't think so. They're headed towards full rebuild, so I don't really get the move for the team. I'd be excited if I was a Giants fan for that move, but I think you lost more than you gained today. I don't know if it really helps them in the long run, but good for him. I mean, he got his money. I'm always very player supportive, more so than team or ownership supportive. So good for him. But it would have been nice to see him in these colors, though. That's for sure. Biggest news in that division: Saquon Barkley going to Philly. That obviously meant that DeAndre Swift needed to find a new home as a featured back, and he did just that. He landed a 3-year deal with the Chicago Bears, who, as of this moment, maybe before the podcast airs, but as of this moment that we're recording, have not traded Justin Fields or the number 1 pick. So we don't exactly know what's going to happen there, but what we do know is they now have a bigger weapon in the backfield.
Yeah, and surprisingly, with all the everything that happened today, really no movement or no even smoke rumors or anything. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Nothing. We haven't really heard anything on the Justin Fields front. But yeah, big on Swift for playing his contract out and then getting a nice little bag there. And Chicago's not exactly in a rebuilding mode. They're kind of in a like wait and see mode, kind of. They're adding weapons, they're doing what they can, they're playing out the string. You never know. They're not trying to rebuild right now. They're trying to make moves. And DeAndre Swift was a good one in adding a piece to that backfield for either Caleb or if they keep Justin.
Yeah, that team doesn't have the best weapons, but like you said, they are not in a full rebuild. When you think of the number 1 pick, you think this team was terrible because they got the number 1 pick. Well, they traded their number 1 pick last year to get this number 1 pick. Wasn't supposed to happen that way, but the team they traded with, Carolina, happened to be the worst team in the league last year. So they are a team that has some pieces that's going to build, and it's going to be interesting to see where they go with it. That whole division really is getting shaken up. Think of now DeAndre Swift is in Chicago. His old team, the Detroit Lions, got an old Chicago Bear last year in David Montgomery, so they ended up swapping teams eventually. Let's look at the Lions. They did really good last year, obviously. We haven't seen too much from them. We saw them lose a key piece of their offensive line to our Los Angeles Rams. Not the biggest news, so I don't want to stay on that too long, but I wanted to mention it. Green Bay was the interesting team in that division, though. Green Bay brought in superstar Josh Jacobs, and for a hot minute, we all thought, oh my God, Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones in the same backfield, Super Bowl. Aaron Jones got released a little bit later, so that dream was gone pretty quickly. But they also got some secondary help. They got the number 1 safety in free agency, Xavier McKinney from the Giants.
Josh Jacobs was kind of out of left field. You'd heard rumors, especially since last year with Aaron Jones, he had kind of restructured his contract, taken a pay cut to stay there in Green Bay. So you kind of thought, like, hey, he's bought in and he's been there forever. So you thought he's bought into the Packer way of life and everything, to at least give this guy a shot. And maybe they did. Maybe they asked him to take another pay cut, but it was, too much for him. So he's on the free agent market too in the wild running back market, which is nuts right now. But yeah, taking a swing and getting McKinney out of New York, which is he, like you said, the number one safety on the market. And there were some rumors that the safety market was going to be the new running back market and kind of dry up. But with McKinney signing for, was it four over 68? I want to say off the top of my head. That's a pretty nice bag for a safety and everything. So all things considered, he did well for himself. And geez, the market today was absolutely crazy. So to see Green Bay throwing around money and they're, publicly owned. So if they're even throwing their name in the hat, like it's crazy.
Bengals fans are having a rough time right now. T. Higgins, the wide receiver who would be a number one receiver on a lot of teams in the NFL, was franchise tagged and officially requested a trade today to get off of the team. That's going to set Cincinnati back. Joe Mixon, the Bengals star running back, also released today. That's going to set them back. Taylor, my question for you, where does this leave Cincinnati in a tough AFC North and a QB1 that's not fully healthy, still on the mend?
So as regarding the T. Higgins situation, this is kind of reading the tea leaves from 2 years ago and then last year, if you remember, Jesse Bates. Jesse Bates was playing out the string. They franchised him. He said the same thing, trade me. And he actually played out the final year with Cincinnati. Then, of course, walk year, signed big bag, went to Atlanta, right? Jesse Bates and T. Higgins have the same representation. So it'll be interesting, but I believe Cincinnati's going to do the same thing they did with Jesse Bates. They're going to draw a line in the sand. They're going to say, hey, play on it. What Jesse Bates said, I will not play on the tag. Guess what he did? He wound up playing on the tag. So I'm guessing T. Higgins is going to do the same thing because this draft is loaded with wide receiver talent. I don't think anybody's going to come dangling a first round pick for T. Higgins right now when they can get one that doesn't need a brand new contract as well with 20 million plus that they have to give a bag to.
Do you think they can still be competitive this year?
I think so, because I wouldn't doubt Joe Burrow. I mean, we doubted him after they started horribly at the beginning of the year, and then you saw them just catch fire. They're so Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They start out slow every year, it seems like, and then just like everyone thinks, oh, these guys are done, and then they go on like that 5 or 6 week heater where it shows you, hey, these guys could go right to the AFC chip or the Super Bowl again. It does make it more difficult with their salary cap situation. But, I wouldn't doubt Joe Burrow and company.
The Gabe Davis move, it wasn't sexy by any means. I think it's a serviceable move for Jacksonville, but I think it hurts Buffalo more than it helps Jacksonville, to be honest with you, because Stephon Diggs, regardless of whose fault it was, he did have a down year. And Gabe Davis was often the guy who came in and stepped up when he needed to. Buffalo, man, they are losing stars left and right. I don't know if this team, and like I said, one person does not a team make, but it's 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4 and then 5 and then 6. They have quite a few starters, man, that are out of there. So I don't know if they're going to be the division champs next year, if they're going to even come close to sniffing that. Miami lost a couple of big names as well, Christian Wilkins being the huge one. By the way, what a move for the Raiders. They lost Josh Jacobs. That's going to hurt big time on their offense, but defense is finally looking good in Vegas. It hasn't looked good in quite some time, the entirety of Derek Carr's career. But Christian Wilkins and Max Crosby together, that's scary hour in Vegas right there.
I was going to say, I bet Antonio Pierce and Max Crosby are the biggest ones celebrating right now.
Buffalo doesn't look great. Miami doesn't look great. New England looks like complete caca right now. Is this opening the door for Aaron Rodgers and the Jets to win a division title?
Oh man, if you go anywhere around New York, that's what they're going to tell you. That JTS hype is real, but I would temper expectations. You have what is he now? 40, 41-year-old quarterback coming off a torn Achilles. Obviously, he played with the media and he did the whole like, oh, I'm gonna be back like no one's ever been back before and the quickest recovery ever. And could he? Maybe, but it wasn't even worth it. It was just a media circus. And that's all New York's been really. So until they, make some salt, that defense, like you said, is real. That defense is absolutely real. Salah is gonna feel a little bit of hot seat this year. So maybe they have a little thing on the table where it's like, hey, you get to the playoffs or you're done. And maybe that lights a fire under him. Um, Obviously Aaron Rodgers doesn't need motivation. He'll create it in his own head. But it could be the door is cracked open. I wouldn't pick them if I had to place a wager. I wouldn't pick them to win it, but I mean I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
This is the last thing I want to wrap up on real quick. With all the crazy movement that we saw, we did see a couple of guys sign big deals to stay with their teams. So Chris Jones in Kansas City, you knew they were going to pay the man. You knew they weren't going to let him go anywhere else. It's about time he got his money. Maybe he should have got it last year for sure, but they won a championship, so they were able to make it work on that franchise tag. And man, he very much deservedly so got paid.
Absolutely. And like you said, it could have been last year, but they decided to play it out. And I don't think there was ever really an opportunity for him to leave. I don't think they were going to let him leave. Because he's been the face of that defense for, even though they used the tag on Snead, you could kind of tell when they did that they already knew that they were probably making headway with Chris Jones, and that's who they're I'd say 1A and 1B, with Snead as a close 1B behind Chris Jones.
I heard a saying today that an elite corner shuts down your best receiver, an elite pass rusher shuts down all the receivers. Another big re-signing was Mike Evans. There was a lot of speculation he could have even joined that team, Kansas City. But he stays in Tampa, keeps them competitive in the division. Obviously, I think that the Kirk Cousins signing is going to point Atlanta as the favorites in the NFC South, and everybody's going to be all about the new look Falcons finally have a quarterback. And I'm a little bit on that train as well, but I do think that Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield staying in Tampa, long-term deals, I think that Tampa Bay is only going to get better. We're going to see a really good competitive division next year, at least more competitive than it was this year.
Tampa Bay's GM, his name escapes me, but his family came out and said, if you don't sign him, no one will let you outside in Tampa Bay. So when your family tells you that, you kind of got to get something done. They did, and then that was obviously the precursor to get Baker back, because as soon as you saw Mike Evans come back, you knew Baker wasn't going anywhere, and he got his little bag too. So, yeah, Tampa Bay, good on them. Re-signing your guys, they got you there and everything, because they won a game in the playoffs, and they weren't expected to do anything last year. So, time to build off that. And obviously, you lose your OC to Carolina to be the head coach, but you still got something to build on.
Couple moves that happened after Taylor and I finished our recording. Joe Mixon and Danielle Hunter went to the Houston Texans. Houston is building up their roster. Derrick Henry going to Baltimore. That's a huge one too. Baltimore filling a much needed space in their backfield. Derrick Henry alongside Lamar Jackson. Those are two tough SOBs running back there. Well, from the field to the racetrack, let's talk about the start of the F1 racing season. Second race, there was a lot that happened in this one. Couple of big stories. We'll start with probably the biggest one, but it almost got overshadowed by another one. Let's talk about Max Emilian Verstappen. 9 straight victories, Jesse. 9.
And not to discredit what Max is doing, but when Sebastian Vettel was at Red Bull, won 4 straight championships. He did win 9 straight races at one point. And just thinking about what Lewis Hamilton did when the turbo hybrid era started, he was dominating for Mercedes. And then of course Michael Schumacher back in the 90s and early 2000s. But Max is a generational talent. I mean, his dad did not have nearly success in F1. But Max is just, he's a prodigy. And there's something to be said about that. He won his first race at Red Bull, so that started the dominance that was going to be Max Verstappen in F1. And now he's got a team where they struggled to compete with Mercedes in the turbo hybrid era at first. Once the new regulations came into effect, I don't know what it was, but Red Bull Racing just went off, and it hasn't even been close. I mean, he even dominates his teammate. You know, Checo Perez is a viable talent in F1. He's been there for a decade, but it isn't even close. And I think that Red Bull builds the car around Max personally. So the number 2 driver for Red Bull is always going to be the number 2 and a distant number 2. We've seen it with Max's last 4 teammates, but there's still something to be said about the talent that Max has, that he can dominate in qualifying, he can dominate in race trim, tire management, and just overall race strategy. And I want to see him lose because we want success among all the teams, and it's just not happening right now because Max and Red Bull are so dominant.
Jesse, that story somehow was almost overshadowed by an 18-year-old who took the course just, 36 hours before the start of the race, knew that he was going to be racing in this one?
Yeah, Ali Bierman, he actually had won pole for the F2 feature race, and then got the call that he was going to be replacing Carlos Sainz, who got appendicitis, for the F1 race and making his F1 debut. So because he was transferred to Ferrari, that meant he could not start the F2 feature race. I mean, obviously anyone is gonna want to start an F1 race over an F2 feature race, regardless of you're on pole or not. But kudos to Ali, man. He got in that Ferrari. He qualified 11th, which is well below what that power unit is capable of. But still, in your first F1 race, your first ever F1 race, and you're putting your car near the top 10, that's pretty impressive. He ended up in the points in his debut, which not a lot of guys do. So, big props to him at 18 years old getting it done, because that's when Max Verstappen did it too. So I'm not gonna try to call Ali a Max Verstappen-esque talent, but
we'll pump the brakes. No
pump
pun intended.
the brakes a little bit, but the comparisons are there. I mean, Ali, 1 season in F3, finished 3rd in the points, jumped to F2, finished 6th in the points last year, and he's already got a pole that he didn't get to race in, but he's already got a pole in F2 this year. And Saudi Arabia is not an easy track. It's a street course, and Jeddah, very tight corners, very difficult track, and he performed very well. He didn't make any unnecessary risks, didn't try to over conserve the tires or anything like that, but just did his thing. And it's a lot different from an F2 car to an F1 car. Very, very different. So mad props to him. Good. It'll be nice to see Carlos Sainz back next weekend, not this coming weekend, but next weekend in Australia. So Ali will be back at F2, but still outstanding debut for him at 18 years old, dude.
All right, Jesse, the madness of March has begun. We have so much more to get into next week. You down to do it again?
Oh man, I could talk about March Madness all day, every day, dude. Let's do it. I'm ready to do it. We'll talk brackets next week.
I cannot wait to get into it. I cannot wait for our fans to see what we're doing bracket-wise. I know Jackson's got us set up with that. It's going to be intense, man.
I'm looking forward to it, man. So looking forward to it. 5 more days, guys, to Selection Sunday. I'm ready.
All right, well, let's go ahead and sign off. This is strange. From Wisconsin out to California. Never done that before. Sayonara, folks.
Wisconsin.
You got a mansion in Wisconsin?
I love how people say Wisconsin, man.
I might take a drive out to the desert next week.